Stance change, stance change. Will you change my stance, or will you die?
Welcome back to another episode of Stance Change, where I am very excited to introduce our next guest on here. We've got former three-time champion, Zach.
Hello, hello. It's good to be here.
Yeah, we have not gotten to hear you on the podcast. I told Dakota earlier today that I was going to be talking to you on Stance Change, and he's like, "Wow, that's a big get."
Well, I'm very flattered.
Yeah, like we've called you out enough on the podcast recently. We're
Yeah,
finally
you
we
gotta
got
come
you
and
here.
really put my foot down on it.
Yeah. So we
All
finally
this
got you
double
on here.
slander.
Look, doubles is a lot of work that I don't understand. If you want to run it,
Oh, you're all good. Don't
I'll
even worry about
support
it.
you. But oh boy, it's just something I'm not ready to dive into.
Sure, sure.
Okay,
It is definitely a different beast for sure.
yeah. So you've got a couple of Pokemon you want to talk about. What do you want to talk about first?
Yeah, so let me preface this by saying these are so I've been playing VGC a lot. We just talked about doubles a bit. And these are Pokemon that have really surprised me in the doubles format, and I think they would translate pretty well into singles as well. So the first Pokemon that we can talk about, I guess, we can talk about Floatzel. So Curtis brought Floatzel up to me, I don't know, a week ago, and I shot him down. I said it was dumb. I said this Pokemon's stupid, isn't very good, and then I got crushed by it. And Wave Crash is really strong. Like
Wave
that is a
Crash is
huge
such a
buff.
huge addition.
I was messing around with some calcs, and it is just strictly stronger than the other Swift swimmers in the other equivalent Swift swimmers. Wave Crash just makes such a huge deal, even though Floatzel's pretty weak, only 105 attack. But rain boosted Wave Crash, banded Life Orb, whatever you want to do. Even resisted hits don't like it very much.
Yeah, I have seen this in singles to easily two-hit KO Roaring Moon.
Yeah, it's really strong.
Yeah,
It also got Ice Spinner, which it's a bit of a buff, but
honestly, that's the exact set that I have on here. The one I've seen in singles most often is Wave Crash, Aqua Jet, Ice Spinner, Liquidation with a Choice Band.
yeah, that makes sense.
Just to hit like grass types and dragon types that would resist your water moves.
Hmm.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'd already kind of run through my head. It's like, ooh, maybe I want to look at weather, and Floatzel is right at the top of that list if you want to look into rain. It's so strong.
I think he's the premier Swift Swim user right now. Like, I think if you put Kingdra next to this, I think I might take Floatzel.
I'm
Just 'cause
totally with
Wave
you.
Crash is so strong.
Yeah, like and also because of its very good speed already, you can afford to run Adamant.
Yeah, for sure.
And you can also
It's easy to run.
yeah, I think maybe in league format, particularly where you know your speed tiers and stuff too, I think there's something to be said for maybe a mixed set on this because it doesn't have terrible special attack.
What is it, 80,
85.
85? That's not too bad, yeah.
Yeah, but I totally agree with you that especially in the format we have currently, Floatzel is the premier offensive rain Pokemon.
Hmm. It is pretty one-dimensional. It really doesn't
Yeah,
get too much coverage. Um, it's bulk up, I guess, but it's really that one set, I think, is what you're looking at for Floatzel.
yeah,
Um,
I agree. But it is so strong, especially with terrestrialization.
yes, for
Uh,
sure. Um,
so
yeah, Terra Water, Wave Crash in the rain. Things aren't
yeah,
gonna like it for sure.
I'm looking through its moveset to see if it got anything else super relevant. I don't think it did, but Wave Crash is a huge boon to a lot of physical offensive water Pokemon.
Yeah, that was like the biggest difference between a lot of these physical types, where fighting gets close combat, fire gets flare blitz, and water never really got anything. It was always waterfall for a long time, which is really weak.
Yeah, and I mean Wave Crash is 50% stronger. Granted, there's the recoil, but especially with like fast, frail offensive Pokemon, HP is only determined, like, it doesn't matter if you can avoid priority, or it's just like, I need to take hazard damage.
Hmm.
So I totally agree that, like, liquidation is run on this set just in the rare cases that you don't, like, you're low on HP and maybe you want to survive a couple of hits.
Sure.
But overall, yeah, wave crash, jet, maybe ice spin is all you need on, like, the offensive set.
For sure. I totally agree. Only thing you're missing is like against other water types.
Which,
But yeah,
unfortunately, your best option there is crunch.
yeah, that's not going to do a whole lot.
Yeah. But yeah, I totally agree. Like, if people, I think, surprisingly, sand is probably the worst weather, I think, in this metagame.
For sure. Lichen Rock is definitely no Excadrill.
Yeah, for sure. Oh wow, that is the understatement of the century. Yeah, I think that, like, obviously Floatzel's really good in rain. We have a lot of good sun options, particularly because of photosynthesis. We have decent hail options, and obviously the defense buff helps it out a lot. But Floatzel, king of rain teams right now.
For sure.
Okay, you want to move on to your next one, or you have any other closing thoughts on Floatzel?
No, I think it's pretty one dimensional. You kind of see exactly what it says. It's
Yeah,
exactly what it says on the tin, you know. Um,
yeah, but it's
but
very good at the one thing it does.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. I guess my next Pokemon we can talk about Toad Scroll.
I'm
Um,
excited to talk about this one because it's not like it doesn't blow me away, but yeah. So what have you seen from this?
yeah, so its ability, right? Its ability is a huge hindrance most of the time. Very rarely will this ability helps. I think Toadscrool is the type of Pokemon that benefits a lot when with a defensive Terra type. So a lot of the time you'll see in VGC you'll see a lot of the time you'll see Fire Toadscroll, you'll see Water Toadscroll, to help shore up some of his weaknesses. But I think in singles, I mean, it gets Spore, which is awesome, of course, even if you are negative priority bracket. It does get Toxic Spike, it gets Toxic, which very few Pokemon do. It gets Spike, it gets Knock Off. So I think already right there, even though you are going last on, I think all of those or almost all of those
Yeah,
moves,
with the exception of knockoff, but
yeah, I think those moves are just so powerful because a lot of Pokemon lost them. That I think it could really shine in the middling tiers in a draft
that's
format.
yeah, that's a fantastic point that it has some of these sought after moves, particularly in toxic and knockoff, and
Hmm.
like Mycelium might obviously a big hindrance in terms of I I mean we'll probably talk about it later, but in singles, Toadscroll, the one thing I've seen from it that I really love is its ability to get, like, be able to spore like Golden Go.
Yeah, for sure.
I guess that's also pretty prevalent in doubles too, correct?
Yeah, in doubles a lot of time this thing gets Trick Room. So in doubles a lot of time it's a Trick Room user,
Oh,
which is kind of
really?
funny. Yeah. Um, but even without the Trick Room part, I think this Pokemon is solid. It gets a lot of random coverage, Energy Ball, Flash Cannon, Foul Play, Knock Off, Leaf Storm. It gets Mirror Coat, and I think it gets Reflect type too. Yeah,
Uh,
Reflect type.
I love a good mirror coat. Yeah, there's a reflect type there. And also one of the things I love about this typing, this is like the because the only Pokemon that got this typing before was Torterra, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
One of the great things about this typing is it resists both Earthquake and Stone Edge, very common offensive coverage. And then also immune to. So, of like the four big offensive types, I would probably say is Rock, Ground, Ice, Electric. And this resists or is immune to three of those four.
Yeah.
I really like its ability to put up hazards and status magic bounce users.
Hmm.
I think this is, and also another thing, because you talked about running this defensive, which I think that's probably the way to go with this, even though it doesn't have amazing defenses, 80, 65, 120.
Yeah.
But I think having 100 plus base speed on defensive Pokemon is, like, so underratedly good.
No, for sure. Like a it gets rapid spin too. So like fast spin is
True.
really nice. Um, yeah, I think I think it's going to be a lot better than it looks like stat wise.
Yeah,
Um,
this on paper, I feel like you look at it and it's not very clear what it does, but the customizability, we've talked about probably at least 10 moves, 10 to 12 moves that you could throw on this Pokemon and it'd be good.
yeah, I'm the type of player who really values like customizability and versatility in a Pokemon, especially in draft.
Yeah.
I really like to. My favorite part about the draft is like the draft and then the team building.
Hmm.
Um, and so I really value Pokemon like this that kind of has a Swiss Army knife of different moves.
Yeah, I was thinking about this the other day. I feel like in Draft League, I think in I don't know how prevalent this is in doubles, but I feel like in singles, four move slot syndrome is something that's talked about a lot, and I feel like it's a benefit to have four move slot syndrome in draft because that just means you have so many options.
Sure, yeah. I mean, like if you are struggling to find your your fourth move out of however many moves, right? Like that could be a blessing in a draft format where you can know exactly what you're looking at,
Yeah, because like this week I
narrow it
don't
down.
need toxic spikes. In some matchups I would, but I don't want them in this one. So that gives you another option. Because you
Yeah,
don't need to plan broadly. You can plan very focused, and it opens up more slots.
yeah, no, I totally agree. This Pokemon's definitely not the type that's gonna sweep your opposing team, but
Yeah,
I tend to not uh, draft sweepers in general, or at least play towards that style.
that's noticeable
I definitely play the more bulky teams, but
for sure.
um,
And this is a
so
great meta for that too.
yeah, Toadsco's definitely in my wheelhouse. Yeah, I like this thing. I've been using it a bit.
Okay, another one. I've really loved the picks you've had here so far. Your third Pokemon that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, so I want to talk about Palday and Tauros. So I think the power of this really shifts depending on how we want to put it into draft. If you want to split it into three, where base, fire, and water,
So
or
real
if you want to
quick,
combine them.
I've thought about this a little bit more because I was trying to figure out what the precedent for forms is because we've been a little bit scattershot on that.
Hmm.
I do think this is most similar to Rotom in terms of like it's different typing, slightly different move pool, but the same stats. So I'm
Hmm.
inclined to tier all three of these separately.
I think that's a good idea. I think that all three of them are different enough, also where uh, they kind of all have their uses.
I do wish base form had something else going for it aside from like just like Raging Bull being fight just like a pretty good fighting move.
Yeah, I think that it might be, an iron Pokemon, but that's okay.
Yeah.
I think the fire and water types are where you're looking at. Fire is specifically my go-to or my take.
Yeah.
Um, so with the fire one, I think so. It has pretty good bulk, right? It has 75 HP, 105 defense, which is it's decent, but it also comes with intimidate. So intimidate really kind of magnifies the bulk on a lot of these Pokemon. Think like Landorus T or Incineroar, where like their bulk is pretty good, but with Intimidate, it really lets it shine. Um, so like we talked about Toad Scroll, this thing's pretty fast, 100 base speed, same base speed. So it learns that Raging Bull move, changes into whatever coverage it is.
And then also
Um,
breaks screens, which I don't think can be understated.
it does, yeah. I think Grimmsnarl or Pokemon like Grimmsnarl could be really powerful, or even I was about to say hail, but snow. Um,
That's going to be a hard habit to break.
yeah, it has been. Uh, but yeah, I think the fire type is really good. Particularly, I really like the defensive fire type and an offensive water type. Uh, so the fire we have things like Will-O-Wisp and Raging Bull, and I think that could help a lot take on physical attackers. It gets okay coverage too, wild charge on headbutt, but I'm really looking at like Will-O-Wisp, Raging Bull gets body press with like
Yeah.
a physically defensive set.
Yeah, I've also seen like bulk up variants that get really out of hand.
Hmm.
it gives a lot of good opportunities to set up versus physically offensive Pokemon. These are definitely Pokemon I didn't like. I was looking at them like they were regular Tauros,
Me too.
and once I saw them in action as like bulky defensive Pokemon, it's blown me away their versatility.
That's exactly what happened to me too. I saw it on my opponent's team and didn't think much of it, and I lost to it and had to look it up now. 'Cause now,
Yeah.
now I got to know what it does.
I'm
Um,
surprised, particularly when paired with water and fire, how good of a defensive type, I guess paired with intimidate, that like water fighting and water fire end up being.
yeah, they're pretty good. Fighting's not the greatest defensively, but fire and water are both really strong, of course.
Yeah.
But I think just having another type in general that doesn't add too many weaknesses, I
Yeah.
think that is can be really powerful
And
for
I also
sure.
think in this metagame, having a extra dark resistance is definitely a big benefit.
Yes,
Because
totally agree.
yeah, because I mean, again, I'd have to defer to you on how relevant it is in doubles, but uh, King Gambit, these two Pokemon pretty much shut it down pretty well.
You'd have to be a little worried about Defiant, but other than giving it too many boosts,
I
uh,
I have been
you
shocked
should
so
be
far
okay
how little Defiant on King Gambit I've seen thus far. I guess it definitely would make more sense for it to be in VGC.
for sure.
But Supreme Overlord, I'm surprised at how often people have been running it. I figured Defiant would be a little bit more common.
I think it's close on which one is better. I think it might, depending on the situation, of course, or in draft, it just depends on who you're going up against or what team you're going up against.
Yeah, and
Um,
that's another benefit to this. That I mean, have you seen anything happen with Cudchew that you like?
no, I've lost to Anger Point Tauros in VGC,
Ooh.
but I haven't lost to a Cudchew
Oh my
version.
god! I just realized, like, I'm guessing. Correct me if I'm wrong. My guess is that it was doubles, Fire Tauros with like probably Meowscarada that Flower tricked into it to give it like crit boost.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Used its
Oh,
its signature move on your partner and max out your attack stat, and Taurus is faster than a lot of the format. They're
classic absolute garbage.
yep.
Oh, I hate that. Like I remember running into that in like the Battle Mason in Gen 6.
It's the type of thing that like if you don't catch it at team preview,
Yeah.
you could just lose to it for sure.
Yeah, because that's good speed, decent attack. Yeah, if you just go up to +6 attack and it's taking very little damage, like just close combat's gonna clean through you, if not Raging Bull or anything. God,
Yep.
that's horrifying to think about.
Yeah. So I guess we can go into the water one now.
Yeah.
Um, so I think the water one's a bit different. It's decent defensively too. But I think where this one shines a little bit more is in an offensive version. I think we saw how good fighting water was with Urshifu.
Yeah.
Um, and
And
I think this is kind
on
of like
this, it's on the
Urshifu light.
special side, but also Keldeo is fantastic.
Exactly, yeah. I think this ends up being like an Urshifu light. Aqua Jet, close combat, um, whatever the
Wait,
signature move
it
is.
gets wave crash. If it
Yep,
also, which I would imagine you'd probably be more inclined to run on this if you're just going for power.
probably, yeah. I mean, I would. Wave
Yeah.
Crash, it gets okay coverage, but I think like a band set could really be nice for this.
Yeah.
Um, so I like this thing as a more offensive with fire. I like it more defensively. I think you can do both with either one. Um, but if I had to like pick a set and stick with it, I think that's where I would be.
Man, I kind of wish this thing also got Ice Spinner. That would be a nice thing for it.
Yeah, not having a an ice move is not great. It
Yeah,
gets a lot of random coverage, but
yeah, because I do feel like as good at like generally good as water fighting is, it's pretty easy to find coverage for it like in the form of grass poison, like fairy stuff. Like it is easy to find like defensive checks for it, but it really forces certain matchups on your opponent's team,
mhm.
which I like out of that.
I think this Pokemon's cool. I don't think any of these three Pokemon will be platinum. I'm not even
No.
sure if any of them will be gold, but I think like we're looking at like silver, a strong Bronzemon. I think these Pokemon that's right where they belong, and I think they should be drafted.
Yeah, I would be. I mean, regular Paldean Tauros, I think will probably
Maybe
slip
not.
by. Yeah,
Yeah,
probably not. But I would imagine somebody's going to run a rain team. We'll see Floatzel. Both of the Tauroses should go, assuming we tier them separate. Which, you know what? I'm gonna make an executive decision right now. We have precedent for it. They're going to be separate mons.
sounds good to me.
Yeah. Toad's Cruel, I could see slipping under somebody's radar, but I would imagine, especially if it gets later round, sounds like you're going to take it.
Well, maybe if they listen to this podcast, maybe it won't slip through. I don't know.
That's
We'll have to
true.
see.
Hopefully, we can educate some people. Okay, so I think next we're gonna have to talk about one of the bigger things. We're gonna have to talk about terrestrialization. So you listened to our previous podcast where we went through the options for that, right?
Yes, I did.
Just a refresh for some people who might not have listened to it. I think our options are we've got restricted options, we have full ban, and then we have fully allow. We'll get into the restricted options if it's important, but I don't think it is right now. How do you feel about it?
So at first, before I started playing, I was a let's restrict it in some way. I think it'd be kind of lame to not allow it at all,
Totally agree.
because I think it's such a cool mechanic. But I think that I'm in the fully allow camp right now. I think it's been really fun to use. I think at, I'm going to speak from doubles because that's what I know.
Yeah, that's fine.
In doubles, we've seen a lot of like really incredible innovation with it. So I'll give you an example. Start of the format, people were running Steel Hydreigon, right? Makes sense. You
Yeah.
can resist that fairy type. But then people started thinking it's like, well, Steel Hydreigon's still weak to fighting, and they were dying to Annihilate. So they changed it to Poison Hydreigon. So now it resists fighting. Well, that's a bit. Poison's a weaker defensive type than Steel. So what one guy did just a couple weeks ago is he ran Fire Hydreigon. So you don't resist fighting, but you're not weak to it. You still are immune to that ground with your Levitate. And he ran Fire Heat Wave, which is a spread move in doubles.
Yeah.
And that was really cool. So it's kind of like this really neat evolution of different Terra types of people playing and learning, and I that was really cool and really fun. And I haven't really seen too much like that in this game.
Yeah, I totally agree. I love the options that it allows. I feel like I've been pretty vocal about this. People know my opinion that I'm worried about like when you are able to see your opponent's team, and it's one thing to be like on the defensive side. When you look at your opponent and be like, okay, I can Terra into this type to avoid a super effective move. But like, I don't know. The fact that you just laid out three pretty viable options for Hydreigon to terrestrialize into, and you didn't even talk about its stab types, which it could use. That means on Hydreigon alone, there's 5 very viable options for it. I think in Draft League, super tough to deal with. I don't know how you ask people to plan for that.
I agree.
That's why I'm a little bit more toward restricted, but I definitely see the benefits of unrestricted.
Yeah, I do think that the move. What is the
Terra Blast.
Yeah, I think Terra Blast. If Terra is allowed at all, I think Terra Blast might need to be taken a look at.
Yeah.
I would hate to be in a good position, then my opponent Terra Steel, Terra Blasts, and Oko is something I didn't expect to.
Yeah, it's just Pokemon getting coverage moves that they aren't normally allowed it's such a big change.
Yeah, and it's much different than with like Arceus or with not Type Null, whatever they will.
Yeah, Silvally.
Silvally. It's much different because those you see it coming, right? If I see a Steel Silvally, I expect a Steel type move.
Yeah.
Where these can come out of nowhere.
But it'd be like planning for Silvally behind a curtain.
Yeah.
It's like you don't know what Silvally you're facing until they click multi-attack.
for sure.
Um,
Yeah, I
so
think it's tough. I think it's tough.
yeah, of the restricted options, so I guess we'll get into it now. Of the restricted options, there is like probably Terra Captains, like what we did with Z Crystals back in Gen 7.
Hmm.
There is Ban Terra Blast, which we've kind of touched on, and then probably there's my proposal where it's basically everything would only get one Terra type per week that you would probably lock at transactions. So that way, in the battle, you would know if this terrestrializes, it will be this type. Of those three options, are there any that you're just like, that doesn't solve the problem I'm worried about?
So for me, the way I team build is I kind of mull it over through the week. So like I tend to write like a rough draft, pretty early on, and then like a couple days later take a look at it again, and a couple days later take a look at it again. So I personally wouldn't like the pick your terror type before the trade deadline or whatever you
Yeah,
want to call it.
the transaction deadline for
Because
sure. I get that.
a lot of times I'm making last minute changes like 10 minutes before we play. Because I'm just like thinking about it. But I personally wouldn't like that. I think I like the idea of banning Terra Blast. I think this world of post hidden power removal, I think I've liked it. I think that not having hidden power as that you know you, that scissor counter, that Tyranitar hit,
Yeah,
whatever. I think I've liked that. It kind of helps those Pokemon not get surprised. And I'm not the type of guy who likes surprises in my Pokemon. A lot of the time, I like cool innovations, but I don't like to get surprised that way, I guess.
yeah, I'm with you because I feel like the core of this is like, okay, I've got all of these things, like all the abilities, all the potential moves it has on it. Adding in, it could be this Pokemon could be any type and have any coverage move, physical or special, at any point in the battle. I think it's
Hmm.
too many variables.
For sure.
And I do think offensively, just getting extra coverage moves is a big problem to deal with. I've been surprised. I thought this was going to be absolutely busted from the get go.
Me too.
It's way more balanced than I thought it would be, but I do think when you're able to see what a potential check to like a Hydreigon would be, then it's just like, okay, they have a fairy type that doesn't have a way that I'm not really worried about them hitting me with a fighting move, so I can go ahead and run the steel one this week. Being able to customize it like that still worries me, but again, we'll have to see what people think. I don't think there's a wrong option other than probably total ban. But
Yeah. I think it's one of those things we'll have to figure out what we want to do this first time around, run it, and see how it works. See if it maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, and
yeah.
figure it out then.
So one last thing I want to touch with you on, and like specifically you, I'm gonna love to talk to Brett about this too. Is some of the Pokemon that we've already discussed banning, and the reason is I want people to look at these Pokemon and be like, okay, I want to, because a lot of people have the idea of like, I want all the fun stuff to be allowed.
Hmm.
I really want people to think about if you would want it allowed if Zach or Brett had their hands on it. Because I think that changes some people's tunes.
Sure. Um,
So we talked about it a little bit beforehand, but I have the current banned Pokemon. I think these are the most controversial ones from Smogon, so I think these are probably the ones we're definitely going to take a hard look at. So Fluttermane. How do you feel about Fluttermane?
so I've actually never played with Fluttermane
Okay.
because I haven't really played any singles at all. I've only played VGC, and Fluttermane is not legal in VGC. None of
Even if you
the
played singles, you would have had about 3 days to play with Fluttermane.
right. But I mean, like, you can just look at this thing's stats and know that it can't be. Like if we're banning Tapu Lele, you can't let this thing in the league. You know what I mean? Like 135 speed, 135 special attack is like that is too much.
Yeah, and plus it also gets access to like the fact that it already gets Mystical Fire and Mystical Fire, Psyshock, Moonblast by itself is pretty much perfect coverage. It also gets options like, oh well, I don't even have its other stab on here. In Shadow Ball, it also gets Thunderbolt, Energy Ball, Nasty Plot, Power Gem, and then Terra. I think puts this over the top for me.
For sure. I even without Terra, I think I'd be in the ban this Pokemon camp.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want this thing gone. I don't like this thing.
Yeah. So also a lot of, we just talked about the fact that sand is probably the worst weather out of the bunch right now. How about this Sand Rush Pokemon Houndstone?
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys have talked about it pretty much, but I think Houndstone in itself is a bad Pokemon. I think that the only thing that gives it any redeeming quality is this Last Respects move. I think if I wanted to run a Sand Rush user, I would rather have Lycanroc most of the time. But without this Last Respects, I think if we get rid of Last Respects, I don't see why Houndstone wouldn't be allowed.
Now we've never banned a individual move before. At least outside. Well, I guess like Evasion Clause kind of covers stuff like Double Team and Minimize. That's the closest thing we've had to it.
Sure.
But how do you feel in theory about banning just the move Last Respects?
I have no issue with it. I think it would need to be like make sure that everyone knew what was going on. It's like kind of like how you have it with when Greninja and Blaziken were in the league.
Yeah, that's going to require a note in the Google Doc.
Exactly. I think if you went about it like that, I think it'd be okay. Because I don't see why this thing wouldn't like. This is like a Iron Bronze Pokemon at best.
Agree.
Without that move.
Because also, if it doesn't have Last Respects, it's only ghost coverage. I have it on the screen here. Is Phantom Force, Shadow Sneak, and Lick.
Yeah, that's not great.
No, like that's its only stab moves. It does have like a good move pool, honestly.
I think that without Last Respects, I think where this thing actually shines is as a physically defensive wall.
100% with Fluffy.
Fluffy and Will-O-Wisp, yeah.
And also Body Press.
Yep. I think that's where I'd look at it.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's a good call there. So I think this Pokemon has enough going for it outside of Last Respects that it's probably it'll be on somebody's radar, but it is significantly decreased in value.
If it's round 9, round 10, and this thing's on the table still, I might draft it. I think this thing is reasonable in like Bronze or Iron.
Yeah. How do you feel about Iron Bundle?
Iron Bundle's kind of weird because I keep looking at it and it's like Delibird,
Yeah.
And when I look at Delibird, I don't think that I'm going to lose to it like this, but I do think this thing's really strong. I think that the combination of Ice Water is very strong coverage.
It's particularly freeze dry. It'd be the ice coverage, yeah.
Also, this is one of the very few Pokemon in the game right now that get Flip Turn, which I think is very, very powerful. I think of a Pokemon we talked about earlier, Floatzel. I think if Floatzel got Flip Turn, I would be even higher on it than I am now. I value U-Turn, Flip Turn, Volt Switch, these types of moves on my offensive Pokemon very highly. Because I hate being stuck inside. being stuck.
Yeah, and honestly, this thing is quite strong with 124 special attack, awesome speed. Because before this thing got banned, it was just running a lot of that booster energy, and it would be able to run Modest. And I think the only knock that people had against this is the fact that its only decent water move is Hydro Pump. Is really the only knock you can make against it, because otherwise I think you have to run...
Oh, wow. It doesn't get Surf.
You have to run Water Pulse as your water move if you want to be 100% accurate. That's the only knock against it, but I mean, Hydro Pump's so strong, if you hit and you don't resist, you're in a bad way.
Yeah, I mean, like, I've used enough Tornadus T to just like know that I don't plan on missing moves like Hydro Pump, so I typically don't.
Well, hold on. So you just go like, I'm just gonna hit. I'm not planning on missing. That's just how you game plan?
I go into a battle and I I'm not gonna miss. I don't plan on missing, so I won't.
So do
And
you?
unless my Pokemon's it like if my like let's say I had Tornadus against a Pokemon like I don't know, like Keldeo, right? And I'm
Okay.
low.
Yeah.
If like let's say that I'm at like 30% and I'm dying to Keldeo's Scald in like
Yeah.
last gen.
Fair.
I don't Hurricane there, right? But if I'm at
Okay.
full and I'm not dead, I just click it,
So I talked to Brett. Brett, obviously a big Tornadoes fan, and he's just like, man, I wish this thing had a more accurate set because I hate having to run Air Slash, which is more reliable. Have you ever
Yeah.
been like, oh, I'll just run the weaker, more accurate move? Or are you just like, no, I'm
No,
not gonna
no
miss.
chance. No, I run Fire Blast, I run Hydro Pump, I run Hurricane, Focus Blast. I don't care. I'll just hit.
Man, that's great because I will sometimes just not draft a Pokemon if it has unreliable moves. Like if Bundle was allowed in the league, I probably just wouldn't draft it.
Yeah, it's really funny though, because like I would never, ever put Fire Blast on a Pokemon in VGC. It's like only a draft thing for me. I don't know why, but like I just don't care.
That's pretty
Like
funny.
I'll just hit.
You know what? That's a good way to plan around it. Koraidon and Miraidon, no point in even discussing. These things are super banned.
Yeah, I saw people comparing Miraidon to Mega Rayquaza, and I was
It's
like, yep,
comparable. Isn't
get
that
that thing out of
wild?
here. Yeah, that is crazy.
Yeah. And then the last thing that Smogon has been, there's probably one more I want to touch on after this, but there's also Palafin hero form. Does this thing have any presence in VGC?
So it's very fringe playable. The only play it sees on VGC is actually on Rain. Hero form Palafin with Jet Punch, banded Jet Punch in the Rain, Oko's Garchomp 100% of the time.
Wow, that's a
Yeah,
lot.
it just dies. So in VGC, you lead it, you flip turn out, or you switch and set up the Rain, and you start Jet Punching stuff.
That's interesting because it runs an entirely different set in singles. It just runs max HP, max attack, bulk up, jet punch, drain punch, taunt.
Yeah. Yep.
I've seen this thing 1v1 a Toxapex.
That's disgusting.
Yeah, like because it gets so strong and you can't toxic it, you can't haze it unless you have a clear smog Pokemon. And the other thing, like clear smog from like Amoonguss can obviously beat it, but all you really need, like you could Terra Steel in draft leagues because you'll know that's coming. You could Terra Steel to get around that. And then also I think it gets Zen Headbutt too.
It does.
It does, which is just stupid. Like,
Yep. This is the type of Pokemon where I wish it had another ability, so we could just ban Zero to Hero.
I'd love
Because
that.
like I love the little dolphin. I mean, he's so cute.
Yeah,
I
like
would love to draft him.
regular Palafins. Let's see. Yeah,
It's pretty.
yeah,
bad.
it's also undraftable though.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
You could give this thing Swift Swim, and it'd be like, oh, this is trash. I'm never using this.
Yeah.
It's cute.
What if they gave it like, what's a Zoomerill's attack? Is it 50?
That's a good
Yeah, it's gotta
question.
be 50. Okay, yeah,
But you know
huge
what?
huge power would be way too good. Huge power would be way too good.
No, I think you could do it because like Mega Metacham has. Let me double check. What does Mega Metacham have? Mega Metacham has 100. This has 70. I think you could do it. And it's got 100 base speed also. Like granted, Jet Punch and Bulk Up and all that shit is like wild.
Bi-
But
Wave Crash from huge power Palafin might be a little too strong. I don't know.
yeah, I don't know. I think it's
I think it'd
got
be
shit
cool.
sets. Yeah, I'm all for it.
Yeah.
Game Freak, give it huge power.
Yeah, true.
But okay, and then the other one I want to talk about, just because again, rumors abound that it's going to be banned in singles probably tomorrow, is Chi-Yu.
Okay, yeah.
So this you haven't also is not in VGC, correct?
No, I haven't used any of these. I'm like vaguely familiar with like what they do. I know Chi is, fast, specially offensive.
Yeah.
Dark fire moves mostly.
So I will also say that I forget what this thing runs as its fourth move. I'm trying to throw it on screen here, and I just feel like I never see it because it only really needs to click fire and dark moves. But because of its ability Beads of Ruin, it effectively, by the time it hits the calc, has effectively 197 special attack.
Yeah, that's I mean that's a bit absurd, right?
Yeah. Like just on paper, that's the way it works out because it lowers your opponent's special defense by, I think it's 25%.
Yeah, it's 25. Is
Yeah.
Qian Pao like also as like
Chen
powerful
Pao's
or?
very good, but I think it has been much more checkable because, particularly in OU, very bad for move slot syndrome because you can't run both Sucker and Ice Shard, and if you do, then do you forego Ice Spinner or Crunch, and then also that means you don't have Sacred Sword, and that means you also can't set up. So it's been more manageable, but Chi Yu has just been the biggest problem.
Sure.
I still
Um,
would like to vote on Qian Pao also personally, but
yeah, I think if because I'm looking at like their stats and they're kind of comparable. Um, it being ice is probably a bit worse than fire on average. Um, but I think that I could totally see this thing being too good in the draft format also, with people having limited answers. Um, so
yeah. And I don't.
Paldean Tauros is looking really nice against this thing, though. I'll tell you that
Paldean
much.
Tauros checks Qian Pao fantastically, either of them. So that's definitely been an interesting thing to see. From I haven't seen any of them. Does this also get Zen Headbutt? I assume it does. Like Zen Headbutt. Oh no, it doesn't get it. So yeah, there's your check. If Qian Pao goes, I'm probably if Qian Pao's in the format, I'm probably taking one of the Paldean Tauros like third or fourth round. I'm not
Just to
fucking around.
gotta get an answer, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, both of those I think are up for debate. I do again, but like I talked about on the ladder in OU, Chen Pao has really bad for move slot syndrome. It's
Mhm.
kind of an okay problem to have in league because like, oh, I don't need Sacred Sword this week.
Sure, yeah.
The other thing that pulls these two things back is they both really want to run heavy duty boots, but they also both really miss out on not being banded, specs, or scarf.
Oh, sure, yeah. Both being weak to rocks.
Yeah, that's the only saving grace. That you either know their choice or you know their boots. And if they're choiced, honestly, that sucks. But also, at least they can't come in infinitely. So
Yeah, I mean, they both look really strong, and I think I'd be pretty nervous going up against either of them unless I
yeah.
had a dedicated check.
And again, if people are out there just like, oh no, I want to see Chen Pao in action, just think about if Zach gets his hands on it, and then just decide, oh, if Zach gets his hand on it, I'm no more scared than if Tyler gets his hands on it. If that's the case, go ahead and vote no ban. But just consider it, guys. I think that's really all we have to talk about. Unless there's any other just, soapboxes you want to get up on, I'll give you the floor. I'm happy to have you here.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I mean, I've played with you guys a few times now, and you tend to know my love for these lower tier mons
Mm-hmm.
that I think don't like Shelmet, right? I think
Yeah,
Shelmet is actually really good at an iron. I think I would draft Shelmet over a lot of the iron Pokemon that we have on the list.
interesting.
Um, and I think that there are other Pokemon um, in that same boat that I think that people can look at, and I think people don't think about it enough. But I think that Pokemon like that could be powerful. I'll give you an example. I think the middle form of Meowscarada, similar to Frogadier, I think this thing could be usable. I don't know how usable,
Jeez, what is
but
that thing called? Um,
uh, Floragato.
Florigato.
Florigato, yeah. Um, 83 attack or 80 attack, 83 speed. It's not that impressive, but I mean, Protean's really powerful. I think that a Pokemon like this, um, if your team is lacking this type of Pokemon, I think it could fit in that slot.
So this
Um,
doesn't get Flower Trick, correct?
it does not, no. You have to use Petal Blizzard,
Or Seed Bomb. Wait, what is Petal? How strong is Petal Blizzard?
90, 100% accurate.
Is it really that strong?
Yep. It
Oh,
used to be one of those moves where, like, after you use it 3 times, you get confused. But I believe they changed it either this gen or last gen, where it just has no additional effect now.
Pedal Blizzard. I think Pedal Blizzard used to be. Are you thinking of what's that called? Pedal Dance.
Maybe I am
Whoops.
thinking of Pedal Dance.
Sorry to everybody who was watching the video because that was garbage. My bad. I had it framed really awful. Sorry, everybody. But yeah, you're right. It gets Pedal Blizzard. Yeah, Pedal Blizzard. I guess would be the way to go.
Yeah, for sure.
Hone Claws, which would be nice to have that in there. Sucker Punch. I wish this got knockoff.
That This is the only one you'll get from me this time. So just keep your eyes peeled on these NFE mons, these Violet mons, especially with the lack of knockoff. I think some of these Pokemon really have can really shine.
That's a fantastic call. I think that's a call to action for people to start searching through NFE. We had already talked about Knackle Stack, which I think is actually going to be
Yeah,
very draftable.
I think so too.
Like I think I'm willing to put that in bronze tier personally, at
I'd
least.
be okay with it,
Yeah,
and I'd probably consider drafting it in bronze.
yeah. That's definitely on the list. So thank you so much for being on here. We've rarely gotten to really sit down and like get real ticky tacky and talk technical mon stuff. So this has been awesome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been fun. I'll
Yeah.
I'll try to join the Discord more in 2023. Who knows?
Yeah, and if you ever have like some just hard stances you want to take and be like, listen, the league needs to hear about this, let me know. I'll give you the floor at any time. We can sit down and record because this has been delightful.
Sure, I'll give you a holler.
Okay. Thank
I'll come
you
up with
so
something.
much for being on here. And thank you everyone for listening. Hit me up if you want to have one of these discussions because I love having them. Love to hear from different people that I haven't heard from before because it gets a little bit echo chambery, just me talking to Dakota about having the same opinions.
Remember to like, subscribe, do all the YouTubey stuff.
All that stuff. Probably there's a notification bell, probably.
Probably.
Okay. Thank you so much. Goodbye.